It's exciting to be back with you on this broadcast channel, Amogate Radio Communications, and we are a mainstay for impactful programs across the board, Mondays to Friday, and hosting this new series of trendy issues in the geopolitical economy. I'm your anchor, of course, Abiodun Abari, and I appreciate your time. Last week, we were able to delve more into the alternative payments and settlement system being initiated by BRICS, and we also weighed in on Donald Trump's winning the U.S. elections and looking at geopolitical implications. So, we reckon that Mr. Trump has been making his appointments. Of course, trying to make sure that when he's inaugurated 20th January next year, he's able to hit the ground running. And Susie Wiles being the first female chief of staff making history, in U.S. history. Susie Wiles, of course, a confident someone who can call the president, a member of the president's-elect kitchen's cabinet. Okay, she was a co-chair of the campaign, the 2024 campaign, and she was state director for Florida in 2016, having also run campaigns for Governor Ron DeSantis. So she's a veteran in the game, and she's well suited for the back end, and she doesn't like the limelight. A steady hand can gather around one who pays attention to details. Okay, and so I think that shows the kind of direction that Mr. Trump is going, trying to fortify his inner circle, trying to make sure that his well trusted people take up sensitive appointments, as it were. And of course, Tom Homan, too, from High's director, bringing him as borders shows his immigration stance, his immigration direction, and how what is going to work his talk on immigration. Of course, he's done it before, and I think him bringing back Tom Homan too is shows that he wants someone who has the experience, the capability, and there'll be little room for excuses, because I think it was one of the main issues for the 2024 election, and one of the main issues why Mr. Trump had a landslide victory, winning all the 7 battleground states, and of course getting majority in the Senate, and of course on course to get majority in the House too, retain the majority in the House, and even with conservative leaning Supreme Court, at least 6-3. I think Mr. Trump will have no excuse in trying to implement his agenda. Also, for me, Tom Homan as Balthazar is a conventional pick, unlike his pick for Defense Secretary, Peter Hegseth. This might be a war veteran in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't think he has the management experience militarily to operate at that level. I'm not saying he will not deliver. I'm not saying he will not perform. I mean, other factors might be important for Mr. Trump picking him, because at the moment Peter is a Fox News host. Okay, and being a defense secretary means you're going to be controlling the Pentagon. You're the Pentagon chief, and you have about over 1.3 million active duty troops around the world. So it's not a kind of job to be taken with kids gloves. And for me, Pete is largely inexperienced to operate at that level, and so for me the pick is unconventional. So that Trump might be looking at someone who will look at defense from the prism of someone who has been put in harm's way. I recall during this the campaign when he was criticizing Liz Cheney and his and her father. The Cheney has been war hawks, saying that she should have a gun trained at her face, in her barrel gun trained at her face, and let's see how she will feel. I mean, Mr. Trump talking from the empathic, from empathy. I mean, we got the various men and women who have been put in harm's way, who have lost their lives in defending their country in wars that one may presume that they are needless. So, I mean, putting someone who has not been in decision-making echelon when it comes to defense beforehand, but who has always been in harm's way in Iraq and Afghanistan. Maybe Mr. Trump is trying to bring in someone who will bring in empathy when it comes to defense. And he has always championed the mantra, peace through strength. So let's see how Peter Hegseth does in his upcoming role as defense secretary. And of course, the rumors are strong as Senator Marco Rubio, a Hispanic American from Florida, and you recall that he was second behind J.D. Vance, and the short list for the running mate from Mr. Trump. Okay, and when I actually analyzed and said Trump actually deepened his base rather than broadened his base, because going for J.D. Vance was like more of the same, someone who's a strong ally, a personal friend of your son, and who's a MAGA to the core, as against going for Marco Rubio, who is more of the Republican establishment's cut, Republican establishment stock, someone like Senator Ted Cruz, who are just latter day MAGA converts, as it were, because they both contested against Trump in 2016 during the presidential primaries. So I thought at that time that Mr. Trump will go for Marco Rubio as a running mate in order to bring in the Nikki Haley voters, in order to bring in the never Trumpers of the party. So Marco Rubio is someone that has always been highly thought of by Donald Trump. So him being penciled down for Secretary of State should not be a surprise. And he's strong on foreign policy. He has experience, and he's strong also on Israel, support for Israel, and he's also rational about financing foreign wars. I think he shares Mr. Trump's worldview as it concerns the advancement of the U.S. hegemony. Okay, right. So, and the interesting pick for the CIA too, John Ratcliffe. Because the CIA too has a lot of influence on geopolitics, and the CIA is usually controlled by the American president, who brings his own director. Okay, so bringing John Ratcliffe, who was a former director of national intelligence from 2020 2021, during the last part of Donald Trump's first presidency. Okay, and he had actually participated in a nighttime news conference then weeks before the 2020 presidential election, where he and some officials accused Iran of actually directing lots of emails to U.S. voters to intimidate them. Okay, so emails to intimidate U.S. voters, so maybe they will vote in a particular direction that will be in favor of Iranian interests. Okay, so but the position, of course, of the CIA in its Senate's confirmation, and for me, John Ratcliffe, being a former director of national intelligence, is it's a conventional pick, so he's going to have a lot to say on the geopolitical economy after being confirmed by the Senate. All right, and I also recall that he declassified Russian intelligence, alleging damaging information about the Democrats from the 2016 election. And when the claims by 51 former Intel officials that the contents of the emails from the laptop dropped off by Hunter Biden at a computer repair shop in Delaware was part of a Russian disinformation campaign. He said then that the intelligence community doesn't believe that, and there was no intelligence to support their claim that it's Russian disinformation. So he rejected those claims then, and actually he turned out to be right, because the content of the emails from the laptop turned out to be real. Okay. So clearly, Mr. Trump is standing towards loyalists who understand the agenda that people voted massively on to give him that landslide victory, at the November 5th elections. And of course, picking Mike Huckabee, former Arkansas governor, as ambassador to Israel, fortifies his bias towards Israel. That's going to continue his strong position towards Israel. I mean, supporting Israel and wanting to give Israel all the support it needs to survive and sustain his interests in the Middle East and the world at large. So Mike Huckabee reinforces this movement, this tendency for the incoming Trump administration to actually appoint key and trusted and consistent loyalists to sensitive positions in order to actualize the agenda that the campaign ran on and the agenda people voted on or voted for. And kindly recall last week when we were talking about the motivations for an alternative payment and settlement system to the existing dollar-denominated system. So we talked about evading sanctions by the U.S. and its allies, being insulated from those sanctions is actually a big factor, a big motivation for countries and developmental states and members of the BRICS blocs. I want to have alternative payment and settlement system. Okay, especially what happens to Russia. So today, we want to look at a case with Indian companies. All right, Indian companies, Chinese companies, and some other companies too. Recall that July this year, 3 Indian shipping companies were blacklisted for allegedly transporting Iranian drones to Russia. And even though Russia has continuously denied using Iranian drones in the conflict. Okay. And I recall last quarter I spoke extensively about how the U.S. hegemony works. It's always my word against theirs. The counter narrative is ignored. Even if it's logical, it's ignored. Whatever narrative that they bring forth is the only narrative that is permitted to exist, and which will be amplified by the mainstream media. All right. So, about 19 Indian business concerns and individuals will be sanctioned by the U.S. for supplying goods and components that Russia uses for its weapon systems to prosecute the war with Ukraine. Okay, so of course hundreds of other entities from other countries too were also scrutinized too, and and finger pointed as regards this. Recall that when we talked about the sanctions against Russia, that the West and its allies also talked about sanctioning any country that aids Russia in its fight against Ukraine, either militarily or by supplying their components that can be used for military hardware. Specifically, the U.S. State Department said it was sanctioning Indian-based Ascend Aviation and Mask Trans, and their directors for supplying components, aviation components to Russia, and even Ascend Aviation was selling ones that were sourced from the U.S. Okay, so they found that sacrilegious. That's bypassing the sanctions imposed on Russia, and so the U.S. felt the need to react. And of course, TSMD Global and for travel too, Indian firms were also alleged to be operating or to have operated in the technology sector of Russian Federation economy. Okay, that is providing expertise, expert knowledge. So, in the production of military hardware. All right, so those firms too, TSMD Global and for travel, Indian firms too, are also in the sanctions book. Okay, because of those allegations. Then the U.S. Treasury Department too sanctioned 14 Indian companies for supplying dual-use components to Russian entities. Okay, so dual-use components are components that can that have both civilian and military use, both civilian and military applications. Okay, so things like circuit boards, ball bearings, and milling machines. All right, so and I don't think there has been a certainty on how these components were actually used in Russia. I don't think the U.S. Treasury Department, for a certain, has confirmed how these components have been used before bringing out these sanctions on these 14 Indian companies, because they supplied dual-use components to Russian entities. Okay? And about 400 individuals and business entities were also in total were sanctioned in different countries by the U.S. states, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Treasury Department, and U.S. Commerce Department too. Accusing them of bypassing the existing sanctions to supply Russia with critical components that Russia needs for its weapon systems to prosecute the war against Ukraine. Right? And they are the accuser, they are the judge, and they just go ahead and do whatever they want to do. That is how the system operates. A system dominated by the U.S. hegemony, which, of course, other developmental states and other power blocks are trying to ensure that the multipolarity of the world is affirmed. So, and a lot of Chinese individuals and companies were named among others. Okay, others from Malaysia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Thailand, Switzerland, Turkey, and of course the United Arab Emirates. In fact, the Chinese embassy in Washington has called the sanctions illegal and unjustifiable, with the spokesperson Liu Pengyu asserting that, and I quote, the U.S. makes false accusations against China's mouth trade with Russia, just as it continues to pour unprecedented military military aid into Ukraine. This is typical double standard and extremely hypocritical and irresponsible. End of quote. So, China saying the quiet part loud that Washington itself supporting the party in the conflict. Although China has not owned up to supplying Russia with anything or even supporting Russia in the conflict, but it's questioning Washington's moral standing in trying to remove another person's speck when there is a log in Washington's eye, as it were. So I think China asserting its voice on the geopolitical terrain, okay, even though it does not own up to supporting Russia in any form, in any ramification, but it's saying that it is not up to Washington to scrutinize China for his activities, that Washington itself needs to clean up his act. That is a part in the conflict by actually pouring unprecedented military aid into Ukraine. Typical double standard, extremely hypocritical and irresponsible, according to Liu Pengqiu, the spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington. Then recall last week we mentioned one or two things about the changes that will come to European security with Donald Trump coming to power as a U.S. president, and we must admit that the days of European countries outsourcing their security to the U.S. has actually come to an end. So the EU itself will be able to take things into his own hands now. It's if he can finally grow up and believe in his own strength and abilities. So that era of geopolitical outsourcing is actually coming to an end, because I believe that Mr. Trump will pursue nationalistic policies to the later, and will put America's interest above any global or any international interest. Okay, so we understand that Europeans worry that Donald Trump will shatter United States security guarantees to his allies, especially NATO members, and of course the ones that concerns nuclear protection, which is very, very paramount. All right, so of course that worry is legitimate. Okay, the concern is legitimate that Donald Trump will shatter U.S. security guarantees to his allies, because he has insisted that everyone has to pay for security. All right, that there is no free lunch anymore. So European countries, NATO countries have to increase their defense budgets to be able to meet up with funding requirements, the funding requirements they originally signed up to. Okay, and of course, European supporters of Ukraine think that Trump might settle the war in a fashion that gives victory to the Russians. For instance, look at what will happen to the territory that has been won over, by the Russians through the battlefield. What will happen in terms of territory? Because European backers of Ukraine, we feel that any loss of territory by Ukraine is actually a victory for Russia, and I will be able to tell Russia to let go of land that it got through the blood of its soldiers that fought, so to speak, for motherland Russia. So there's instances where one is to thread the needle to be able to achieve a lasting peace agreement. Okay, so of course a lot of European elites will have preferred it. Harris in power. Alright, because she expressed ironclad support for NATO, and so she said she would keep backing Ukraine to win the war with Russia. Alright, so it was more of as long as it takes for Ukraine to win, we'll keep backing with Ukraine. So, of course, it's understandable that a lot of European elites would have preferred a Harris victory. In fact, a poll showed that the level of trust in Harris, was the highest in Spain at 70% and the lowest in Poland at 58%. Okay, just to buttress my point. And I even want to put it to you that even if Harris had won, okay, and with an ambitious government, ambitious spending in terms of health, in terms of housing, student loan forgiveness, and with the rising debts, So, do you think that raising taxes to fund a foreign war would be popular? And do you think that you still get legislative support? So, I think even with the Harris reign, with Harris winning the White House race, the days of Europeans outsourcing their security was still actually coming to an end. But it was, we can talk about the different pace. When it comes to Harris, the pace might be slower, but with Donald Trump, I think the reality might done in faster. Because you want to implement some things to the letter on day one, and of course this week we will not leave without mentioning Nigeria's call in the geopolitical terrain. Okay, with President Bola Tinubu calling for an immediate end to the war in Gaza, and insisting on the viability of the two-state solution. Okay, so while addressing the Arab Islamic Summit, which was specifically called to address the Middle East situation, it was there constitutionally or legitimately representing Nigeria is still contention locally. Because Nigeria is seen to be a secular state, especially what is contained in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Okay, so of course our focus is on what is said, which is quite remarkable. Because as much as possible, we tend not to put our thumb on the scale. Giving you adequate geopolitical analysis of the geopolitical economy. Okay, so we always ensure that our positions and our arguments are as bias-free and balanced as possible. All right. So he said, and I quote, "The conflict in Palestine has persisted for too long, inflicting immeasurable suffering on countless lives. As representatives of nations that value justice, dignity, and the sanctity of human life, we have a moral obligation to collectively bring about an immediate end to this conflict. It is not enough to issue empty condemnations. The world must work towards an end to the Israeli aggression in Gaza, which has persisted for far too long. No political aim, no military strategy, and no security concern should come at the expense of so many innocent lives. In a rules-based international order, states have the right of self-defense, but self-defense must take proportionality into account. In line with global, legal, diplomatic, and moral frameworks, an entire civilian population, their dreams and futures cannot be dismissed as collateral It is not just a diplomatic article of faith. It is a vision grounded in the principles of equality and mutual recognition. Achieving this vision requires a commitment to dialogue and respect for history. We all know that this conflict did not begin on October 7th in 2023. It can only be resolved through principled compromise based on appreciation of the proper contexts. This conflict in the cradle of history is so visceral that the ripples of division spread far and quickly. The corrosive impacts of the images of endless violence repeated on 1 billion smartphones around the world is huge. We need to find new pathways to peace without delay. End of quote. Coming from Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu at the Arab Islamic Summit. So we look at key things. Of course, there must be commitment to peace. All right. So in finding that commitment, of course, it talks about resorting to history. That resorting to history will help, of course, find common ground for compromises. All right, to be able to achieve agreement. Okay, and talks about achieving that peace without delay, because delay means more lives are being lost. I think that aligns with Trump's vision too. That I recall when Netanyahu came to the U.S. On a visit and visited Trump telling him that whatever he's doing, he has to get it done quickly. Whatever he's doing, he has to do it quickly. And another key aspect of the statement of the Nigerian president has to do with proportionality in the face of self-defense. Yes, of course, Israel has a right to self-defense. Israel has a right to defend itself against aggression. Even it can be proactive too. Okay, but what's the proportionality? How much is too much collateral damage? Collateral damage in terms of death of civilian population, women, children, defenseless. What's the proportionality? Okay, how much is too much in terms of collateral damage? That's also something that is up for debate. All these and more I'll be giving to you when next I come again on your devices. But at this juncture, I want you to remember that at Amogate, we're always ready to help and support your organizations to work optimally, creating frameworks and processes for optimization of resources and attainment of goals. You can contact us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram at Amogate. You can also visit our website at www.theamogate.org. Our email is contact@theamogate.org. I hope you have had a rewarding time with me, and I can confirm that it's been a pleasure hosting you. Until I come up again on your devices, it's bye for now. Thank you.